Welcome to a special virtual edition of the Skeptics track at Dragoncon. And now, your host, Angie Matty.
Hello and welcome to the virtual streaming Skeptrack for 2020 from Dragoncon. I'm Dr. Angie. I'm the Assistant Director of the Skeptrack. And today we have with us Michael Stackpole, who is a writer, a podcaster, a general man about town, and he is going to tell us about his experiences with debating believers and all kinds of theories. So please, thank you for joining us. He's coming from Phoenix.
All right. Thank you, Angie. Thank you for having me here, and thanks everybody for watching. What I want to do is one, just let you know who I am. I'm a New York Times best-selling author. I write a lot of books. Not all of these are mine, but a chunk of them are. A lot of science fiction, and I was, for a long time, the executive director of the Phoenix Skeptics. I worked within the gaming industry as part of the industry watch committee that dealt with all sorts of weird things connected with games, when games kill and that sort of stuff. And my bachelor's degree was in history. And the reason that's relevant is because the nice thing about a history degree is it teaches you how to research. It teaches you the value of primary resources and actually figuring out how to find truth and assess truth in claims and evidence and stories that people offer. There's a huge philosophical question that we have to deal with as skeptics, and that is, why do people believe? And there have been a lot of people who have indeed written vast tomes and treatises on why people believe. But a couple of key things. People believe things because they believe the informant. You know, the person who told them this is someone that they just trust. Or the information feels right. Nowadays, especially on the internet, the way things are reported mirrors real news sources. You can have flashy graphics on a website, and all of a sudden you look as legitimate as a mainstream news source or a university or some other authoritative source for information. And a key thing, and this gets back to the information feels right and this trusting the person who's reporting, is that the information and the appeal to the person bypasses the logical brain and appeals to emotion. And this is really important for a lot of people who are not intellectually forward, for people who don't think first but feel first. Emotions are facts. And so the same way that we accept facts as being real, they accept the emotional validity as making the thing that they connect it to being real. And so that is a truth for them. You have to remember that belief requires trust and faith. And they have trust, they have faith in the person reporting. They have trust and faith in themselves. So if this tallies with things they've heard before, they believe they're smart enough to know what's going on. As I said before, their emotional reactions indicate truth, and they want to believe about themselves that they're not ignorant about a particular subject. They want to believe they know, because if they don't know, this takes a shot at their self-esteem. One other aspect to this is that belief sets people up for betrayal, for a crisis of faith. Once you believe something, you will always have a chance to be shown the truth, and you're going to feel betrayed. And this is a negative emotional reaction. Nobody likes that. So as you are presented with evidence that contradicts what you feel is true, and that evidence wins out, you're going to have this negative emotional reaction. This negative emotional reaction is something which is really valuable to us as skeptics. I think too many skeptics go out and they believe that we can win this battle with unbelief or ignorance through this vast, wonderful Perry Mason moment where, you know, in a public debate or in talking to someone, you can say, you know, but isn't it true? And they will confess, and everybody around will, you know what the truth is. And all of a sudden the day will be won, and, you know, 12 people, 25 people, you know, you're debating someone in an arena with 500 people or 1,000. Suddenly they will all convert to the truth of the skeptic path. That's never going to happen. We win this stuff one-on-one, and we win it by telling the truth, not lying, because at the core of it, this crisis of faith is a betrayal and a loss of trust. When they look at an authority figure and they say, you've lied to me. If we're the people who have never lied, we win because they still trust us. So it's really important that as skeptics do, we use the truth, we use evidence, we use things that are verifiable to make our case. And if we never lie, we will win people over one by one. As it is, I also think every skeptic has a time before they become a skeptic. For me, I grew up Catholic, and I grew up accepting everything that I was taught, by the church and in parochial education. I remember reading Erika von Daniken's Chariots of the God, and this was one of these things of, oh my, think of all these things being true. How wonderful all of this was. And I remember very specifically my crisis of faith came not so much out of von Daniken, but I remember, again, growing up Catholic, there was the dogma of the virgin birth. And it wasn't until many, many, many years later that I was reading a book about folklore where it presented multiple examples of how virgin birth was used at that time. And all of a sudden, I had that shock runs through me of, oh my God, they're lying. What else are they lying about? And this inspired me to go and continue to research and obviously make certain life decisions, which revert. Well, I'm here, right? So, so that's that's pretty much how that breaks down. The things we do as becoming skeptics, and it's really important as a skeptic, I think, is we have to be intellectually curious. You have to be willing to take a run down that rat hole. Sometimes read books from the other side just to see how they think, and you need to be prepared to do the things to refute what they're saying. But you read everything: fiction, nonfiction, articles. Again, because I write for a living and I work for myself, I have that excuse to, consider work going down the internet rat hole and just glumming onto all sorts of stuff. And I tell myself that at some point you're going to use this in a story. I know that I'm lying to myself, but important to give me the permission to go ahead and do that and just stay intellectually alive. Through the Phoenix Skeptics and joining a skeptics group, and if you've got a local group, you definitely want to check them out. There are also groups on the internet you want to be part of, and obviously you're here. Having other people that you can talk to becomes really, really important. Because sometimes we don't have the necessary knowledge or the necessary background or to figure out when somebody's lying. And just having other people you can talk to backstop what you are thinking or to ask questions of and to get some resources, get pointed to things, to get educated is really important and really, really helpful. I do have to say that there is a flaw among skeptics, and I've seen this especially where skeptics have gone out to do public debates. We skeptics, especially people who are researchers or are teaching heavy-duty scientific subjects, because we cherish facts and rely on facts, we think they're enough. We ignore the emotional side of things. We ignore how the other side feels, because to us, facts are more important than how we feel about them. Yeah, we feel good about facts because they are facts. This other side doesn't quite get it. We have to remember that how we say things is more important than sometimes what we say. I learned this when I was doing radio debates. There was a host, Victoria Jones, who was here in Phoenix, and I'll mention her a little bit later in a couple of the adventures that I had. But she looked at me one time before we were going on the air, and she said, "You realize you're not going to entertain, or you're not going to educate anybody in this radio show. You're just going to entertain them." And we as skeptics need to be entertaining, because people will remember that we were cool, we were calm, we had answers for everything, so that when they have another question about another subject, something that we never even talked about, in their head they're going to say, "I bet that skeptic person would know what this is all about. They'd have an explanation for it." And that's all they need. It feels right to them. That's all they need to justify not falling for another one of these scams, another one of these, nutso conspiracy ideas. Especially intellectual contempt doesn't win anybody over. You're never going to convince somebody that you're right by making them feel bad. So be entertaining, be understanding, present them reliable sources, and you win them over one by one. All right. Last thing, and this is really important for all of us, because we are intellectually oriented, and let's face it, most skeptics are fairly brain proud. We're proud of how smart we are. So there is something that I refer to as the smart man fallacy. A smart man says, "I'm going to go to get my cards read, or I'm going to get my palm read. And I'm a smart person. And if they are tricking me, I will figure this out because I'm smart." Now you go into that experience, and no matter how smart you are, you have no idea how many years of training this individual has. No smart person goes to a David Copperfield show and says, "I'm smart. I'm going to figure out how he does this stuff." You just go and you're entertained. But when it comes to a card reader or a psychic of some sort, we go in thinking, "I can figure this out." And when they come up and they do a brilliant cold reading, and they're telling you all the stuff that you want to hear, you come out of it, and now you're in a trap. You haven't found any trick. So your choice is, I'm stupid, or they have powers. And which one of those choices is far more emotionally satisfying? People will say, yeah, they've got powers. So be careful. Understand that as smart as you are, in certain experiences, people are smarter than ever. I think it was, or smarter than you are. I think, was it Mark Twain said, "Never argue with a fool, because a fool will drag you down to his level," and then with experience. Yep. So, don't credit yourself with being smart. And one of the smartest things you can say is, "I don't know, but I can do the research later." All right. One of the first experiences that I'll talk about, and is sort of indicative of this smart man fallacy, and also goes to anecdotal evidence, which is always a problem, because when somebody tells you a story, it's true for them, and they never have enough details that you can verify anything. there was a time in Phoenix. One of the great things about Phoenix is blue skies, wonderful weather. This is why we have an Air Force base out on the west side where they train tons and tons and tons of pilots, because there are very few days when you can't fly. I was driving through Phoenix. I was driving down Shea, and through the sky, coming from the right to the left, there was a black object. This object was not a saucer. It was not a plane. It was angular. It was an agglomeration of triangles. And it flew from the left across my windshield to the, it started on the right, flew across to the left and vanished. And I had no idea what it was. Could not figure it out.
Therefore, aliens.
Well, there you go. It was, by strict definition,
That's right.
was.
Therefore, aliens.
Yeah, it was a UFO. Luckily for me, about a minute later, it came back and it had leveled out. And it was a stealth bomber. It was the one of those I had ever seen. And when it was going by the first time, it was up. It was at an angle, so it was not flying parallel to the ground. It was at an angle. And from where I was seeing it, the wings were offset. Everything was wrong. And I still, to this day, would not know what it was, except that it came back and it was leveled out, and I could see what it was. So understand that a lot of people don't have a frame of reference to understand what they're reporting. And this is really, it's also important, a little secret thing that you can see, and you see this a lot with UFO reports or the classic UFO reports. They would talk about the description of the UFO, and then they would talk about the person who was reporting that they had seen the UFO, and they would say, so-and-so, an upstanding man in his community, a doctor, had practiced for 27 years, ergo, from that subtext, ergo, this person wouldn't be lying. Now, my dad was a doctor, smart guy, honest as the day is long, had no frame of reference about planes or UFOs or anything like that. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean that that his reportage would be at all useful because he had no frame of reference. One of the other things that you have to understand about this stuff, and it goes to the satanic panic, and certainly was true when games were being accused of murder, is that some people get identified as one thing, but they also have something else going on. The number of cops who would be investigating cases who were also Christians and self-proclaimed Christians, their Christianity is not mentioned or not dwelt on or not thought about because they're a cop. Therefore, what they're saying must be trusted. Well, other things that they are can bias what they're saying. So when you look at anecdotal evidence, you have to accept that what the person is saying is probably true for them, but you don't have to accept them as a reliable narrator. And what you have to do when you're doing an investigation is look for whatever details they can give you that helps you try and figure out what's really going on. Mm-hmm. First thing I want to, aside from the stealth bomber, there was out here at Scottsdale Community College, there was a class called Developing Your Psychic Powers. It was a not-for-credit course. It was 3 hours, 3 hours once a week for 4 weeks, and having apparently nothing better to do with my time, I went. Actually, I think it was only 3 weeks, only 3 sessions. I went to take this class, and what this person was basically teaching was to trust your psychic impressions of things. Now, the way we would do this is, as we did in the first class, first thing we did was we did a creative visualization. I write fiction for a living. So I'm used to adding things like color, bizarre stuff. I mean, surreal is what I do just when waking up. As we did our creative visualization, as we walked down a long corridor, as we, were directed to see a building and then see a sword and see all of these different things, I'm doing what I would normally do as work. And specifically, I had a novel in which a character, a novel I'd written, Italian Revenant, in which a character could, with the magic sword that he possessed, he could just reach out and the sword would come to his hand in the blink of an eye, and that was just a gimmick out of the story. And so
I wish I had that for the TV remote sometimes.
Oh, well, there you go. Exactly. Exactly what we want. Early Jedi powers.
That's right.
So when we were discussing, or when we were describing to the class what our visualizations were, she said, because she had said that at the end of our visualization, she asked us to imagine a giant stone and a sword stuck into it. And so what happens, and then we're supposed to, interact with the sword. And so as she's debriefing us, she says, now what happens when you, what happens with the sword? And some people tugged on it and some people slid it out and, described it. And we had to describe the sword and everything like that. And I described the sword in loving terms because I have swords, and described it in, again, occupational hazard. And then she says to me, she says, well, what happened when you tried to get the sword out of the stone? And I said, I just reached my hand out and it came to me, which stunned her, right? And I'm thinking, and that was on page 5 of the book. So this was the kind of thing that was our warm-up. And then what she asked us to do, she asked us each to write down the name of a person on a slip of paper and put it into a hat. And then she drew names out of the hat so that, and whoever's name was drawn out of the hat, we would go up and describe that person. And then everybody in the class would, they'd give a brief description of the person and say their name. And then everybody in the class would call out what our impressions were. And her instructions to the class were, don't question your impressions. Just whenever you have one, call one out. So in this first class, people were calling things out rather hesitantly, and you'd get some hits and you get some misses. And I was slowly building a profile of who this character was, because if I was going to offer a guess, then I would be more guaranteed to be right. But nobody else was doing that. At least that was my impression. The second class, we go to do the continuation of that particular exercise, because we'd only gotten through like a third of the class's names. And so I sat in the second class and I graphed hits over time, thinking that if people were using any critical thinking skills whatsoever, as the profile of this person developed, there would be more and more hits as we go over time. I mean, it seems to me perfectly logical. There was no pattern whatsoever. It was random hits and misses throughout, which told me that everybody in the class was in fact doing what she said. They turned their critical thinking skills off entirely and were just blurting stuff out and not building a profile. So congratulations to them for following instructions. But that's not how it works. Of course, I turned into a psychic superstar because I was not turning critical thinking skills off. And I would make logical conclusions based on all the hits. This caused a problem with the teacher because her star pupil, a guy who was taking this class for the 4th time, and I was getting better than he was. We come down to the last class. Now, the name that I had put in, which was the name of a character that I had just finished writing a novel about, Someone who does not exist at all. My name got drawn, and so I went up to the front of the class, and I decided to do a psychological experiment.
Mm-hmm.
The guy with whom I was rivals, I've forgotten his name. I didn't like him anyway. I decided that everything that he would offer would be wrong. And there was a lovely young woman in the class who was she was very, very shy, and it had taken a major act of courage for her to get up and say the name of her person as we went through the exercise. I decided everything she would offer would be correct. And so I say the name, and the whole thing starts in. And everything she says is right, everything he says is wrong. She begins to blossom. She starts adding more and more detail. And I was throwing out leading questions. She would say, "Oh, I see him in a place with a lot of books." And I would say, "Oh, that's probably the law library at the firm." All you are thinking, law library at the firm. This guy must be a lawyer or, at least clerking for somebody, a paralegal. Nobody offered that as nobody offered that as a guess. Nobody brought up he has to be a lawyer. At this point, as things are going along and her star pupil is being destroyed, and mind you, this psychic had been in practice for 21 years. She does this for a living at the time. This was 20 years ago. At the time, she was booking her services at $1.25 an hour. Okay, I mean, a fairly, substantial amount of money to be reading cards for people. She takes over, and she says, because her guy had said, I sent somebody, an older man, his grandfather. I sent his grandfather, an older man, tall, white-haired, everything like that. And I said, oh, no, his grandfather's not like that at all. And the psychic then jumps in and says, well, might that not be someone who's got a grandfatherly role in his life? And I said, well, it could be a senior partner at the firm. Again, big clue. Nobody bites at that. And so the psychic says to me, she says, how well do you know him? And I said, pretty well. I'm thinking to myself, since I created him. Just kind of guessing, and she says, I sense something in his chest. I sense something going wrong with his heart. So you need to talk to him about that. There's something in his chest or in his stomach, that's going wrong. And also he needs to talk to his mother. And somehow I kept it together, for that particular thing. But I guess the point of all of this is that the people in the class were good, lovely, and wonderful people. They were curious. They were, just taking a class to do something. But they literally were asked to not think critically, and they followed the instructions. They did what they were supposed to do and just allowed themselves to be led down this little garden path. And it's, this is just the way normal people are. And again, if we as a skeptic, we look at them and go, oh my God, you were the stupidest thing on two legs. You're not going to win them over. So you have to be careful. Yeah. Another experience I had, and this was on a radio show. I got a call late one night from a producer. They were looking for someone to debate someone about creationism, but the rule was that the person who was going to do the debate about creationism didn't want anybody with an advanced degree. And so I don't have an advanced degree, and there was nobody else in the Phoenix Skeptics that wanted to do the job or could. So I said, okay, I'll go do it. So this was the early morning drive time thing. So you show up at the studio at 5:30 to go on at 6 a.m. I've been to the studio countless times at that point. I come walking in, and here is the guy that I'm going to be debating. Clean cut, white shirt, pressed black slacks, black tie, looking very prim, everything like that. I'm in jeans, jeans and a button-down shirt, looking like I'd only woken up about 15 minutes before, and shook his hand, and I said, so this will be interesting. I said, one of the things you're going to want to do, and I pointed to the water cooler, I said, you're going to want to get a cup of water because you get kind of dry doing these things. And I knew this had to be his first debate, at least on the radio station, because he came dressed for television, and this was radio. And so he says, well, thank you. He says, have you done this before? He says rather nervously, and I said, oh, yeah, but after the first 5 or 6 times, it's a piece of cake. We go into the studio. Again, I've been in the studio before. I've worked with the host a couple of times. I take a seat, which is to the host's right hand, so I can see all of his computer screens. I can see who the callers are, and I can see what their question is. So now I know ahead of time what we're going to be asked. He, on the other hand, is seated at the far side of the studio. It's very awkward for him to get up during breaks to go get more water, whereas I can get there. Plus, he's looking out at the window into the lobby, which is very, very distracting while you're doing one of these things. I start chatting with the host about shooting automatic weapons, because the host is a big gun nut. And so we're just having a wonderful chat, and I noticed that the guy across the way, eyes are getting very, very wide, because this is some rather odd conversation that he hadn't expected. And the show begins, and I've been nothing but pleasant to him. But when the show started, I dealt very hostilely and very shortly with him. Things he would bring up, he would go into a long spiel and say stuff. Things he would bring up, I would just say, well, that's not true. And then carefully explain why it wasn't true. And I would be, again, fairly curt. And then we'd go to a break. I'd be chatting with the host a little bit more, be unbelievably pleasant, even pleasant with him. We're back on the air, and I'm very, very mean. It got to the point because we did 2 hours, we got to the point 1 hour in, the guy looks at me and says, you have to take it more easy on me. at which point I knew that I had won. And this was critically important, that if they're going to be a spokesman, you can, in hopes of being entertaining, you can go after them. But again, never do things that are not factual. Present your evidence, be good, but you can point out that they're just not all there. Now, the thing with creationism, and the guy was very nice. I found this in my library just before here. He actually gave me this book. This was the book that he brought into the studio. It's in the beginning. It's a textbook about creationism from the Center for Scientific Creation here in Phoenix, and it's a big book, and it's just full of all sorts of stuff. But the critically important thing, and here, and I'll just read a passage to you because this explains creationism and the vitality of creationism in a nutshell. Quoting, "If evolution happened, then death was widespread before man evolved. But if death preceded man and was not a result of Adam's sin, then sin is a fiction. If sin is a fiction, then we have no need for a savior." So let's quickly review then.
Well, it's not wrong, I guess.
Well, it's perfect circular logic. Mm-hmm. Okay. If we have creation, we have a Garden of Eden. If we have a Garden of Eden, we have Adam. If we have Adam, we have Eve. If we have Eve, we have a fall from grace.
Mm-hmm.
And if we have a fall from grace, we have Jesus and a need for Jesus to save us all.
Right.
And because we have Jesus, because we know Jesus came, then we had to have a fall from grace. We had to have an Eve. We had to have an Adam. Therefore, we had to have a Garden of Eden. Therefore, we had to have creation. You see how it all fits?
Well, its first supposition, though, is if there was death before that.
Right, right.
And so if you can stop there, that algorithm is already fulfilled.
Absolutely. And this is the thing that again, this is the level of, I mean, we all know that it's a total logical fallacy. But people who are believing because they trust their parents and they trust everybody else who brought them into this belief system, that makes that belief system very emotionally satisfying for them. So it's important to them on that emotional level. It goes a lot to who they are as a person. Mm-hmm. You know, they grew up as this individual. What do you do when that goes away? And so this is very, very crushing for them. And you know, one of the reasons why I'm willing to do public debates and things on that order to speak publicly is because you need to point these out. Again, you know, there's not going to be, you know, well, I hope for this video there are 1 million hits on YouTube, but I don't think that means that there are going to be 1 million skeptics converted.
Right.
You know, but you just hope that one person hears it and decides that they're gonna go over. Another radio show adventure, which was so much fun. Victoria Jones, who I mentioned before, this radio host, called me up and said, I've got a therapist and she's got a woman, and under hypnosis, she regressed this woman back to her life in 1460 Ireland. And so she's going to come into the studio and we're going to regress her and she's going to do this regression to that life in Ireland, 1460s. Would you like to come in as our skeptic? And I said, I am all over that. And I prepped some questions. A key question was going to be a simple one. What is it? You know, what are the staple foods you eat? Because I was pretty sure that this life regressed to Ireland. At that time, the woman would say that they ate a lot of potatoes. And potatoes didn't make it to Ireland until 1589, introduced by Sir Walter Raleigh. So, you know, it's a real quick gotcha moment. So, yes, absolutely. Do your research, be prepped, and be ready to go. Very important if you're going to be a skeptic debunking something. We get into the studio, and the woman goes under hypnosis. She is not going back to Ireland. She's going back to 1850s China. She's remembering a life in China. And I'm sitting there going, oh my God, I know one fact about China. Trying to figure out how to put this into it. And she's going on and on and on about how she was a young woman and her name was Mei Li and she had learned to read and the landlord, beat her father because he'd allowed her to read. And, and she just went on and on and on and on and on. And before I could even pass, because I furiously wrote down my question, which was, please name the Taoist God of the Dead, so that the hypnotist could ask this. Suddenly it's over, the woman is out. Oh. And I'm sitting there going, holy crap. So Victoria, I'm just gobsmacked. Thank God it was only radio because the look on my face must have been horrible. Victoria talks to her a little bit, asked her how she feels, asked her, what you felt about that thing. And then Victoria turns to me and says, and Mike, what do you think? And something clicked in the back of my head. And I said, well, I think she just relived the second season 2-part opener for the television show Kung Fu. And the woman, without missing a beat, goes, "Oh God, I love that show." and that was that. So, as a skeptic, no matter how well prepared you are, sometimes dumb luck really ends up being your very, very good friend.
Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good.
Yeah, absolutely. That I've lived by that. Another time, and this again just goes to the you have to ask the right questions. I had a conversation. I was at a science fiction convention. I had a panel. This was in Arizona, and I was on a panel about psychic phenomena with a guy who was part of the Arizona Ghostbusters. And he brought some tapes and he brought some different things. And it was very much in earnest and really thought that they were doing a really, really good job of scientifically double-blinding things and making sure that they weren't, that they were trying to do a scientific study. And one of the things he said is, look, we take people, we have this tape of what we think is a ghost saying something. And we bring people into a room. We don't tell them what they're going to listen to. We give them a pencil and a pad of paper, and we play the tape, and we say to them, just please write down what you think is being said. And so they're not coaching them about what the ghost said or anything like that. It's just what's being said. And I very simply turned to him and I said, hey, that's great, but don't you think the question really ought to be, what do you hear? Because by saying, what did this person say, you're prompting them to listen for language. Mm-hmm. And the guy was, again, rather surprised and kind of embarrassed. I don't know if that's what they do now. But again, it's the little simple things that you can look for that will open up questions that people ought to be asking and open up avenues for other people to begin to question what they've been told.
Mm-hmm. So we're starting. I'm sorry. We're starting to get some questions. Did you want to take those now, or did you want to wait?
Oh yeah. Well, let me do the one last thing. I'll skip that story because I did mention in the thing there was a guy who had a faith preacher who had a cure for AIDS. So this was another radio debate. A good friend of mine, David Alexander, a magician, was a friend of Randy's, and a skeptic, had come to Phoenix and was giving a talk to the Phoenix Skeptics. And then I took him from the library over to the studio where we were going to do a radio show. David had not been prepped about this, knew nothing about it other than, we were going to do it. And on the way over, I explained to him that there was a local preacher, said he had a cure for AIDS. The guy had a church. He believed in a regimen of fasting. For him, fasting would cure everything. And he had, and it was published in his newsletter, he had a doctor in Montana telling him, and he'd named the doctor, telling him that his regimen of fasting had worked to cure someone of AIDS. And I said to David, I said, look, I've done all the checking and stuff like that. All I need him to do is to say that this doctor, that this person is a doctor who practices in America. It's a 2-hour debate. We're into the second hour, and David just starts in with a rapid-fire set of questions. Okay, you say this doctor is from the United States. Yes. Is he from Montana? Yes. Is he licensed to practice medicine in Montana? Yes. Those are the 3 questions that the preacher asked. And it was wonderful because we're in a studio, so this is radio. But David literally turns to me and goes, he extends his hands to me like, here it is, it's yours now. And I just looked at the preacher and I said, I've checked. There is no doctor by that name that is licensed to practice medicine in the United States or in Canada. that was the end of that. That preacher literally walked out of the studio. For the last half hour, it was David, me, and the host. And the host was very angry at the preacher for having walked out. So it was a lot of fun for us to be able to talk then about skeptic subjects and all of this stuff. But always, always, always do your homework. They will always give you, ask for specifics. Ask people to cite sources. Get the data you can use to learn more, become more educated. It turns out from what research now says, intermittent fasting probably is not bad. So this guy may have had something going for him. Curing AIDS, on the other hand, probably not.
No, I'm going to go with no on that one.
Yeah, I think no.
I am licensed to practice medicine in 5 states, so no.
Well, you would know. Yeah, and the thing is that for a con man, it'd be really easy for him in his presentation to say, in Africa, people who have AIDS are said to have slims because they rapid body weight loss, and all he has to say is, and you see, these are people who are trying to lose through fasting. Now, if they did it the right way, and someone goes out, they may have heard that it's called slims, they see pictures of people looking emaciated who are identified as having AIDS, all of a sudden for them, that sounds right. Okay, and con men, and face it, there are lots of them are making money off of claims like this. They're going to manipulate everything. And again, that's why you want to do your homework. That's why you want to check.
Right. Those make me particularly angry because it takes advantage of people's fear of medical problems and general lack of knowledge about medical issues. So that makes me particularly angry when they take advantage of those folks, because those are the ones who are the most vulnerable.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
It just infuriates me. So we have a question from the board. How do you maintain the level-headed approach given the really out there nature of so many current unskeptical beliefs?
Look, there are times that it is incredibly frustrating. And it's kind of important to have a circle of friends that you can vent to, that you can say, oh my God, you would not believe how stupid these people are. But when it comes to dealing with things in public, or dealing with friends, trying to talk them through this stuff, you have to remember that, one, you're trying to do something that is going to help them. So you want to be helpful in that regard. And two, they've been taken in essence, they're victims. Now, if you're dealing with someone who is maliciously promulgating this stuff, again, remember, you're never going to convert them. You just want to arm and inform the other individuals. And in that case, being entertaining, being sympathetic, and presenting facts, and presenting people with the tools to ascertain the truth is pretty much all you can do. And so just keep yourself focused on that. Divorce yourself emotionally from any of these things. And it takes a little practice to learn not to let people get under your skin. But once you do that, remember, they don't know you. Somebody's going to engage you in a public discussion and be angry with you. They don't know you. They aren't really taking shots at you. They're taking shots at who you think they think you are. Once you realize that, it's really easy to ignore the barbs and the arrows, because they're shooting at some image over here as opposed to really hitting you.
Mm-hmm. So I can't. I just kind of have a question. I think I'm formulating it poorly, but what do you think about writers or authors or artists who exploit the belief system in order to make money from it? So, for example, an atheist writing a book that's meant for true believers, or say a person who would fake a cold reading in order to make money from those who do believe in psychic powers. Can you talk about that kind of thing? Have you run across it at all?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very, very tricky thing, and people will engage in this sort of behavior for all sorts of stuff. Some of them will engage in it for money. Some of them will engage in it just to have somebody believe in them, to be their follower, to be their adherent. I don't particularly like that behavior. Mm-hmm. Would I fault a farmer who raises eggplants even though he can't stand eggplants? Not particularly. This is a little bit more virulent than that because you're dealing with people's emotions, mm-hmm. and it's having a greater life effect. I know of magicians who have written New Age books, and so on one hand, you have this magician that writes an instruction manual to magicians on how to, fake feng shui readings or do something as part of an illusion, mm-hmm. as part of a trick. And on the other hand, they'll take virtually the same text, dress it up with some new agey language, and kick it out there for the believers. Mm-hmm. I don't think I can do that, but if they can justify it, it's not for me to judge. It's because they're just allowing people to express themselves, I suppose. Mm-hmm. I think it's important to note that I think a lot of people try and cover over things by saying, look, this is for entertainment purposes. You shouldn't take this as real. But, and this is a long-standing thing, what responsibility do authors have for what people do with what they write? Okay. I mean, I can write countless novels, and for one person it's just a novel. For someone else, I'm speaking to their soul. Okay. I can't be responsible for what they do when they speak to my soul.
Right.
For me personally, I don't like it. I would stay away from it. I don't think promulgating a lot of this stuff is a good idea. Mm-hmm. But I also understand some people gotta pay the rent and gotta put groceries on the table.
Okay. All right. So I know that you talked about magicians, about science or very intelligent people being able to be fooled, and that was one of the things James Randi had talked about, and why he so strongly encouraged that magicians be involved in the planning of experiments for these kinds of things. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, no, I think that I've been lucky enough to both at Dragoncon and elsewhere to meet Randi and chat with him, and I think he's 100% correct. I have again, my friend David Alexander was very good in pointing out to me a lot of magic texts. Because I wanted to learn more about mentalism and how it goes off, because that's the one that psychics use, and it is very important to have people who understand stuff. I mean, I've gone to see magicians with people that I think are well educated, but they just don't have the grounding to know what to look for, and it's. They'll always want to know how was that particular trick done, and again, these are smart people, very successful people. That God, I'm sounding like Donald Trump. I was one of the last times I went to a Chris Angel show in Vegas, and I was there with a bunch of West Point graduates, my brother's cadet company, and they were interested in how some of the illusions were actually done. And I didn't have any problem explaining it to them because Chris Angel does not do anything that Harry Houdini had not done better. These were secrets that have been out there for a long time. So it is important for people to be able to get context and be able to see what is going on to protect themselves. And I think scientists who are going to be running experiments with people who are claiming extraordinary powers have absolutely got to safeguard against fraud and abuse. And so, yes. And I think the other thing with Randi and magicians is, again, Randi understands entertainment. There is nothing that Randi did not do in dealing with skeptics that was not entertaining in some point or another, which makes it much easier to accept and want to entertain more of.
Okay, thank you so much. I'd like to give you the last couple of minutes for shameless plug or any kind of other resources that you think we should have.
I've got a Patreon project, patreon.com, Michael A. Stackpole, where I'm doing fiction every month. And, so there's the shameless plug. And I think the other thing is look, find a skeptics group near you, get involved, and train yourself up to be able to address these things. Because you being on the front lines, you being there, talking to people, are going to be able to fight this in small groups, and that's how we win. It's great to watch the big flashy stuff. It's great to watch people get up and say things or watch videos on YouTube about, opposing the skeptics or opposing the believers. But not until you're in a group and you're able to talk with somebody and have a heartfelt conversation are you really going to understand what motivates them, and then figure out why they're interested and figure out other things that they ought to know to protect themselves. And just remember that you're always helping them to protect themselves.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your joining us today, and thank you so much for watching us on our live streaming Skeptrack with Dragoncon. These videos are available on skeptrack.com. Thank you very much to Calico Cove Studios for allowing us to film here. Thank you, Derek Calenduno, Director. I'm Dr. Angie. Bye, y'all.
As fun as all this streaming content is, we sincerely cannot wait to see you all in person again next year. Remember to stay healthy and safe until then. Wear a mask when interacting with other people out in the real world. Want more Skeptrack? Get more than 10 years of Skeptics Track programming at our video archive. video.skeptrack.org